book and pick 'em when I really get to clicking, but I'm looking for a sister to revive 'em when I kiss 'em. If you want some melon, just let me know.
Hi and welcome to Absolute Clarity, a new podcast bringing you all the business travel news you need to know about. Each episode we welcome a guest onto the show to give us their thoughts and opinions on the headlines, as well as bringing a topic of conversation for the second half of the show. If you would like to get involved, you can tweet us at clarity_TM using the hashtag Absolute Clarity. I'm your host Kyle Daniels, and today I'm joined by James Kington of CBRE to talk about nightmare travel. Welcome to the show, James.
Hi.
Just a bit of background here, James. What is it you're doing? Where are you from?
So I'm a chartered surveyor based in Manchester. I work for CBRE in the valuation department.
Obviously, as this is the first show, format might change a little bit, but the main thing is I wanted to cover two news articles today. Those are the calls to limit alcohol at airports, and also we'll try and get into some of this mire around Virgin taking Daily Mail off the shelves and Richard Branson coming back and kind of pulling the rug out of the staff. Ryanair has called on UK airports to enforce a 2-drink limit after a BBC Panorama investigation suggested arrests of drunken passengers have risen by 50% in a year. This came out probably about August last year. I think that one of the stats was a total of 387 people were arrested between February 2016 and February 2017, up from 255 the previous year. A lot of newspapers picked up on this. It was across everywhere, Sky News, BBC, Guardian, and so on. It's been picked up again recently because the Home Office have said that they're considering bringing this in the Licensing Act into UK airports, drinking time from 10 a.m. onwards. I know that Jet2 and Ryanair have kind of set their stalls out. What about yourself? What do you think? Obviously, you do a lot of business travel. That's why you're on the show. What were your feelings about the...
Well, I mean, it probably depends what you're travelling for. If I'm travelling on a stag do or I'm going on holiday, then you probably want a beer in the airport. It's a difficult one. I think it's like a lot of these things. It's probably a minority spoiling it for the majority. Like I'll have a drink at 7 a.m. if I'm going on holiday, because the holiday starts when you get to the airport and you're checked in, and when you're there with the kids, it's just, you're stressed out, have a beer. But look, people drinking to excess in any situation, it causes problems for other people, doesn't it? But how much of it is down to the problem getting worse, and how much of it is down to airlines really being tight on costs and not wanting to have to deal with the aftermath? I mean, I don't know, but can you really complain if they drop it? But then ultimately...
I think Ryanair saying about a 2-drink limit is one thing. I think bringing in this not serving alcohol until after 10 a.m. is another thing, because surely you're just going to get people booking on later flights. Or they're going to bring their own alcohol, or maybe get drunk before they get to the airport.
Well, one of the things I read about it, where they were saying you've got to be careful what you sell. You can't... In what other situation like that can you go? You can't walk in the travel centre particularly and buy mixers and miniatures.
Yeah.
So, but you can in an airport at the duty free. Well, that's only for drinking then and there. So I think it's a difficult one. I think ultimately you'll get people drinking more before they get there. Potentially drinking on the flight, their own booze, or realistically, you're then going to have people watching out for someone buying a bottle of vodka in duty free and then drinking it at the airport, which... It's just adding hassle on that level.
It's an odd one, because as far back as I can remember, people drank at the airport. Like you said, people who went away on a holiday had a drink. The figures at 255 more arrests between Feb 2016 and 2017 on the previous year. Part of that, is that not just tougher stances by the police, by the airports? Because I could imagine that the drinking hasn't maybe increased, or... I
mean, the other thing is it a percentage? Because as an absolute figure, are more people flying than were flying last year? Are people being stricter? With everything going on around terrorism, things like that, there's probably more police in the airport than there were 5 years ago. So what we don't know is, like you say, has there been a forced crackdown? I've seen people drinking when they've been flying for the last, probably 15 years or so, and I'd not particularly noticed it getting any worse. I've never seen any big problems, and I've been in airports a lot. So, is it particular flights? Is it particular times of the day? There probably needs to be a bit more nuance than a 2-drink limit.
And it probably comes down to where you're flying to. I mean, Ryanair already stops people flying from, I think it's Glasgow, Prestwich and Manchester to Alicante and Ibiza, bringing their own alcohol onto the plane.
Yeah, it says a lot about Glasgow and Manchester
Exactly.
that they're the places that have stopped. Funnily enough, knowing I was coming here today, I sort of mentioned this in the office to sort of see what the general opinion was. And my boss is from Glasgow, and when I mentioned certain airports had been limited, she just looked at me straight away and went, I bet Glasgow's one of them. So, there you go. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's about that. Maybe it's being sensible about certain flights, certain times of day. It's an odd one that it does sit outside the licensing laws. But the consequences are harsh. If you turn up to a flight drunk, it's a big call for security to stop you, because it's not like getting thrown out of a bar. By telling a member of staff that they have the ability to stop you getting on a plane or stop you moving towards on a flight, the consequences of that decision are much bigger, and the person's going to kick off a lot more. If you're politely asked to leave a bar because someone felt you had too much, or they feel you should sober up. I mean, I've had it before where I've gone to go in somewhere and they've said, look, mate, walk around the block a couple of times and then we'll let you in. You're not really going to get annoyed at that. But if someone's saying to you, sorry, mate, you're not going on holiday, all your mates are going on that stag do and you're not going, that's a big call. That's a big responsibility to put on a member of staff to make that call. So if they're going to crack down on it, you've got to have the right staff doing it.
I mean, we're looking at this from a leisure perspective as well, but I mean, you travelled a lot for business. Have you ever had companies that have had certain regulations about drinking before you've got on a flight? Is it never come up because it's never been an issue?
It's never really come up because it's not been an issue. I think there's been obvious that there's different rules in different countries. If you're flying out of Muslim countries, things like that, you'd perhaps be a bit more cautious. We'd often, if we've been away for a long time, be a bit more relaxed on the way back and wanting to have a drink and sort of relax a bit. And I did have a lot of situations whereby I was often at the airport very early before a return flight because of internal travel or other reasons. So you'll sit and have a quiet drink, but I mean you've got to be going some to get drunk. You're not going to get to an airport more than 3 hours before. So by the time you've gone through security and everything else, you're putting in some effort to get properly drunk. But yeah, I can't remember having seen a problem with it from a business point of view. But then I wasn't getting a business flight to Ibiza at a time a stag do would be flying. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that they picked up on, there's a line here that says a total of 19,000 of Unite Union's cabin crew members were surveyed. 4,000 of them responded, with 1 in 5 saying they had suffered physical abuse on the flights. Clearly, from their point of view, they're going to be looking at the duty of care of their employees, are going to be looking at that. But then again, some of this is going to come down to, if you're a cabin crew, like you were saying before, if you're a cabin crew member and you approach someone that's obviously stag do, hen do, had a few too many to drink, and you start trying to enforce some things on their holiday that they probably feel entitled to. Yeah. Because some people go in with that entitlement of, I paid X amount of £100 for this holiday, you're here to serve me. Yeah. Obviously, it doesn't work that way, but that's when it can get a little bit aggressive. And
yeah, I think so. And look, it's totally unacceptable that people are being, assaulted or harassed or whatever it is on a flight, regardless of what your job role is. I think, unfortunately, probably cabin crew fall into one of those historical positions like a barmaid or a waitress who probably have to suffer of it more than other people because alcohol's involved ultimately. There probably has been a rise in how much of this is down to stag do and hen do's that they've just escalated over the years, haven't they? There's now, it is people going abroad, so it is more people put in a position where they're going to have a problem on a flight. It's absolutely unacceptable that anyone should be assaulted in that way or treated in that way. But that, alcohol or not, that is just wrong. And I think that's part of the whole bigger thing that, everyone realises how unacceptable that is, and the world is turning that way. And I think sometimes cause and effect has to be considered. I think there's a zero tolerance on that nowadays, which is absolutely correct. But, how much of that is caused by purely alcohol and how much of it is people getting giddy because they're going on holiday and they feel that someone like that in the past, perhaps people have felt that's a bit more fair game than other people they come across. And it's like anything, people will do things when they're on holiday or in a bar that they would never do in their normal life, and that probably does extend itself to flights and airports, unfortunately.
Would it change your choice if you were coming to book an airline if they had, say like Jet2 for instance, a banned sale of alcohol before 8 a.m. on their flights? Would that affect who you choose? Would you necessarily choose an airline that maybe doesn't have such strict regulations, or does it not generally matter to you?
Well, it totally depends on the purpose of the flight. If I was 10 years younger and organising a stag do, then I absolutely probably wouldn't book that flight if I was involved in organising it, purely because I couldn't be bothered with the hassle of the other people saying, "Oh, why have you booked this? We can't have a drink."
Yeah.
And now, if I was flying, I've got a young daughter. If I was flying with her, then maybe the converse is true, and I wouldn't want to end up on a flight with a load of drunk people. But ultimately, I've not particularly had a bad experience, so it's not something that's really on my radar when I'm coming to think about it.
Obviously, the Home Office is still coming up with this, they're still looking into it. So, judging by their previous record, we'll probably have a decision 2022, 23. By that point, all of us will stop drinking because it'll cost too much money.
Absolutely, yeah.
On to the second news story, and possibly the one that kind of is dividing opinion more than any at the minute. Backstory of this is that Virgin decided that they were going to stop stocking the Daily Mail. The decision that was told to the Daily Mail was that they just didn't have the space for it. Later it came out that the staff on Virgin Trains said that views and opinions within the Daily Mail didn't align with theirs.
Yeah.
So obviously their stance on immigration, LGBT rights and unemployment. Daily Mail's hitting back at this, saying it's disgraceful. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Richard Branson released a statement saying that he doesn't believe in censorship. They're going to restock the Daily Mail while they look into it.
Yeah.
What are your views really in terms of what the original stance from Virgin Trains and then from Richard Branson?
I think to begin with, you've got to look at the wider where we are in the world. I think that, two big issues are that we're in a bit of an age of outrage that people not necessarily look to be offended, but I think potentially more easily offended in some instances, quite rightly, in some instances not. Personally, I don't read the Daily Mail. I think the stance they take on a lot of things is, I don't like. However, I was once told that actually the best thing you should do is read the newspaper you don't agree with, because otherwise you're in an echo chamber just hearing what you want to hear. But the Daily Mail's gone down this route of, and it's to do with the internet. They've each paper's had to take its own view on how they're going to make money in the current day and age. Daily Mail have gone down the route of clickbait. They have, as a business model, done fantastically well out of being outrageous and offensive. They do it on purpose. It generates big headlines. It gets clickbait on the internet, and that works for them. Now, I completely can see, and I don't think it particularly is a brand that is in line with what Virgin seems to try and stand for. I've got no issue with them dropping it. I don't think it's censorship, because they don't stock every newspaper. They're not a newsagents. If WH Smith had done this, or Tesco's or something like that, that is censorship, because they stock every newspaper and they are choosing one newspaper not to stock. This is just, a product range, and they're dropping something from their product range. Yeah. I'd be in agreement with it personally, but I can understand why the Daily Mail have been very clever in the way they've reacted.
Yeah. Just looking at the Daily Mail now, just going on there. The headline: lesbian YouTuber star wins damages in landmark UK revenge porn case against her ex-boyfriend for sharing videos of them. Ex-Wales manager Gary Speed was one of 4 men coached by paedophile boss Barry Bennell. Theresa May going on about Carillion. You've got Irish PM mocked for saying stuff about Brexit. You can kind of see where Daily Mail, like the Virgin Trains, is coming from.
Those probably are the stories of the day, but they'll also have, celebrity in bikini, that kind of thing down the side. So, and some of the stances they have taken recently have been difficult. Now, it's all been complicated by Brexit, because they are very pro-Brexit. Branson is on record as saying he's for Remain. Yeah. The other papers they stock are for Remain. So the Daily Mail have played that card. And, unfortunately, the Daily Mail has a lot of influence in this country. They've reacted in a way that they've backed Branson into a corner, because I think of the way it's been. Now, if it's to be believed that this is genuinely from the staff upwards saying, we don't think this, we're not happy to be selling this, we're not happy to be stocking it. On that level, it's the same as people not stocking The Sun in Liverpool because of their stance on Hillsborough. There is a history of this, and they're not a public. Virgin Trains aren't a public body. They're not, they're not a newsagent. They're not your go-to place to buy a newspaper. In this day and age, you want to read the Daily Mail. You can buy it at the train station, pick it up before you go. You can read it on your phone. It's not censoring you.
They're not going to be taking it off you, are they? They're not going to see you reading it on the train and snatch it out of your hand.
Yeah, that would be censorship. If they were saying, we're not letting you bring the Daily Mail on our train, absolutely, that is wrong. I wouldn't agree with that. But they're under no obligation to sell any newspapers. Ultimately, I'm sure they don't stock. Having been on a Virgin train fairly recently, they haven't got the Sunday Sport. There's plenty of newspapers they don't stock.
Maybe that's the way that they should have gone down the route of, listen, we don't stock every newspaper. Well, we don't agree with your stance on a lot of things. Here's a list of other papers that generally we don't have an issue with that we still don't stock.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the space. Realize we're giving up seats, paying seats to stock newspapers.
It's very difficult. I think I'd be very interested to see if you did sort of a straw poll what people would think. But I honestly, I think I'd like to see more companies take these kind of stances. I think it's a really positive thing that you've had the likes of Lego and Paperchase, backing down after their customer base has said, we don't want you to be associated with the Daily Mail. I mean, to me, Paperchase seemed a crazy one that they ever got involved with the Daily Mail in the first place. Yeah, it was an odd link anyway. It felt like an odd situation.
A lot of Lego users do read the mail, though. Apparently, a lot of those 6-year-olds
I can
just
well
can't
imagine.
get enough of that mail.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I don't know. It's dodgy ground, but.
I mean, what about Branson kind of coming in and pulling the rug? Because Branson has always, to me, seemed like very hands-on with his staff, like he's a man of the people.
Yeah.
He's built up a lot of loyalty with his staff over the years. And not just his staff, but users of any products that he has. And then to come out with that does seem to be very kind of...
Well, I mean, it's a joint venture, isn't it? Because it's Virgin partnering with, I believe, Stagecoach. It's certainly a partnership. Yeah. So, behind the scenes... It seemed a lot of flack was aimed at him personally rather than Virgin as a brand. So whether that's affected things, but yeah, I'd have had more respect for him if he'd have stood there and gone, I will look into this. I don't know why the decision was taken, but I want to hear my staff's justification before it feels a bit like a snap decision because of pressure, external pressure. Now, whether that is pressure from the Daily Mail or whatever it may be, but I'd rather he'd backed his staff. And if I'd have been one of those staff who'd taken that decision, or if I'd have been a staff if I'd have been a staff member who'd have felt that I'd been listened to, that I didn't agree, whether it was say it was the majority, if I was one of that majority that worked for Virgin, felt we'd been listened to, felt that the management have listened to us, they've taken a decision that we want them to take, and then the man at the absolute top turns around and says, actually, no, we're not doing that. I think it's pretty demotivating. But it totally depends on how that process has come about in the first place.
Part of the responsive part there was saying that they did listen to staff and they valued the staff and whatnot. Freedom of speech, freedom of choice, and tolerance for differing views are the core principles of any free and open society. While Virgin Trains has always said that their passengers are free to read whatever newspaper they choose on board West Coast trains, it's clear that on this occasion the decision to no longer sell the mail has not been seen to live up to those principles. I get where he's come from. I get the fact that he wants to live in this society that is very open, that's very honest, and that's free speech and whatnot. Sir Richard is in a no-win situation because he's got to think about the people that are using the trains.
Yeah,
he's got to think about his staff. He's got to think about the cost. It's him and Barry Souter. And he's in kind of a catch-22 no-win situation. He's got to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
And he can't advocate for freedom of speech. He can't advocate for non-censorship if his company's doing that.
Absolutely. But then, I mean, they were selling the Daily Mail, so that, that's a choice. I'm not sure if Virgin do it or not, but, certain places where you travel will give you a newspaper. I think it's the case in first class that there are some newspapers for free. Now that's a more interesting one if they'd have pulled Daily Mail from what they were giving away. Ultimately, they could be stocking those Daily Mails and throwing them away at the end of every day. I mean, they'll probably sell more of them now because people who want to read the Daily Mail
will take that stance.
Yeah. But, if you're the editor of The Sun or the owner of The Sun and they're not stocked, aren't you going to turn around and say that, well, we should be stocked as well? Is he going to have a situation where he's having to sell every newspaper under the sun? I think it was... I think it was a good stance because I think some of what they say is terrible. And my bigger issue with the Daily Mail is that they often take very little responsibility for what they've said.
Yeah.
And, they do say things that cause a lot of problems. And it's this whole issue that you get with a lot of newspapers where, they'll splash something over the front page and then it proves to be wrong and the retraction is hidden away in the bottom corner of page 7. They're bad for doing that kind of thing. But ultimately, people like it. It sells papers. That's what their job is. His job is to run the trains. Look, it'll get swept under the carpet now, but I'd have rather seen him stand by his staff. You know, rightly or wrongly, I think he should have backed them and then reviewed. While, you know, they've made a decision. That decision stands. We will review it. We may restock them in the future once I fully understand what's gone on. Yeah. I think to force them into a retraction straight away is a bit unfair on whatever process has gone on, because it's Richard Branson. Like, he's not going to be involved in that nitty gritty. No, I don't think anyone would expect him to be. Yeah. But I just think ultimately you've always got to back your staff and then take that decision later.
Yeah. Well, it's a good stance. If only you'd have been running Virgin Trains, you wouldn't have had this issue, James. Yeah. This is what it comes down to. Maybe Richard's listened to this. He's probably not, but if he is, start your own newspaper, Richard. There's a load of headlines you can get from the Daily Mail, though. So what we're going to do now, we're going to move on to the topic section. I know you brought a topic with you today. We're going to be talking about nightmare travel. Like you say, you travel a lot for business. But what we'll do, we'll take a short break and we'll be back with that straight after this.
Are you looking to make cost savings to your travel program, but don't know where to start? Do you want to make your business travel more productive, but don't know how? Do you need to improve travel efficiency, but can't find a way? These are big issues which will resonate with many business travellers and travel buyers. In our new report, Planes, Trains and Marginal Gains, we tackle these issues and give you the tools to make small changes that equal big savings. To find out more, simply visit claritytm.co.uk and download the report today.
And we're back. Thanks for joining us again, James. What we wanted to do, topic of conversation today was nightmare travel. Yeah. I know that you've had a lot of situations in your career where you've travelled. Yeah. Some good, some bad.
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. So less so now. Working for CBRE, I'm UK based. Previous to that, I worked for a company called Rushton International. As the name suggests, a lot of international travel there. So I was there for about 5 years. All in, and spent a lot of time travelling the globe doing that, doing insurance valuations of various assets around the world. So certainly did a lot of travel.
What was the first business travel that you've ever done?
So it started off when I moved, when I started at Rushton, and to begin with, it was a lot of UK based stuff. Travelling up to Scotland for a week, into Wales, wherever it may be. So covering off lots of UK assets, which was fine. Pretty simple stuff, mostly in the car and hotels.
So that was it. It was generally just driving up to these locations and you'd have a hotel there for the time.
Well, you tended to try and do a loop, so you'd often be. It often wouldn't be conducive to being on a train, because you'd be. You wouldn't know how long you'd be at each place, and you'd be trying to pick off 2 or 3 locations. I did a bit of it on the train where I could, because it was, let the train take the strain, as it was. But mostly driving. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And equipment-wise, was it easier with? I mean, did you have much equipment that you were taking along, or was it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't too bad. It was just, just like a standard sort of laptop, disto, so nothing very big. A couple of things chucked in the boot.
And did you prefer the driving the car? Because did it give you a bit more freedom than you would have had if you had a train? If you got to the hotel, you couldn't.
I didn't mind it. It totally depended where I was going. If I was travelling north, then I was more than happy driving, because we did a fair bit of work in Scotland. But once you get out of Manchester, very little traffic up that way. It's quite a nice run through. If I was going south, I'd sooner get on the train, just because it just got so busy. Yeah. The car gave you a bit of freedom, and often you just didn't have a choice, realistically.
And what were the hotels like that you were staying at? What kind of range were we talking about? Cheap and cheerful, or?
I'd say it's a mixed bag. Usually, most of the time we were travelling on the client's dime, should we say? So it was mostly stuff you could claim back as part of the contract. Sometimes it wasn't, in which case you'd try to go a bit tighter. So I mean, where possible, we were in Premier Inns, Holiday Inns, that kind of thing. We stayed in. So to begin with, at one stage we had a Premier Inn card, so we'd just always stay in a Premier Inn, nice and easy. Knew what you were getting, consistent. Food got a bit dull, but at least you knew it was going to be a decent enough hotel when you got there. When you couldn't do that, you were sort of on your own and booking your own thing a little bit. And some of those got a bit ropey. So I can remember staying in a B&B, which all seemed fine on the internet, and then when you got there, it was a nice. The toilet was literally in the room, It said it was an ensuite, but it was literally in one corner
You
of the room.
can't get more ensuite than...
You cannot get more
ensuite.
ensuite. Yeah, no, they're literally...
Or prison, I think they call it.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't far off, yeah. Literally just a toilet in one corner, shower cubicle in the other, and a very dodgy bed. And that was one of those days where you're like, oh...
Did it feel a bit Only Fools and Horses when they went to...
Yeah, not too far away, yeah. Well, I've done inspections in prisons, and they were probably better than this place, but there you go.
What was important to you then when you're booking your own hotel? Was it the proximity to where the client was? Was it amenities they offered? What was the...
So, look, it changed as it went on. When I first started doing it, I was green around the gills, and you were just trying to, you felt like, I'll save the boss a bit of money, or they'll keep everybody happy, and then you kind of realise that actually no one cares. You saving 20, 30 quid on a hotel is not really making any great difference to the world. So, but initially, you try and you'll shop around, and God, looking back, the time I wasted trying to get a good deal at times, when in fact, made very little difference to the ultimate end goal of the job. But to me, proximity to site, I'd usually like to get up early, get the job done, and then have a bit of time in the hotel in the evening. So, generally, just as long as it was a comfortable place to sleep, I was pretty happy. When you were having an odd health kick or something, you might insist upon a gym, but how often it actually got used, I don't know.
As long as it's got stairs, as long as you're on the top floor,
you just that's it. Yeah.
I mean, what about things like Wi-Fi? And was that important to you from
yeah, I mean, that became a big bugbear because, it meant you could do work in the evenings, which, when we were away, sometimes I'd be away for 3 weeks, especially when I was doing the international. But even on the UK, if you're away for a week and you're trying to keep everything straight with what you're doing, and you get emails, and maybe you want to Skype home and things like that, not having Wi-Fi was really irritating. What was really annoying was when you get there and you've paid for your hotel room, you've paid for your thing, and then they're like, actually, I want an extra tenner off you for the Wi-Fi, and that kills. And it's all well and good that it's free down in the lounge. I don't want to sit in the lounge. I've been dealing with people all day.
Yeah.
I'm on my own in a hotel room. I just want to, if you want to, Netflix and stuff wasn't a bigger thing when I started it. But now, I'd certainly want Wi-Fi in the room so you could sit and watch a movie or something like that. But yeah, it was just frustrating when they were trying to charge you again. You're like, I'm only paying whatever I'm paying at home, 20, 30 quid a month for your Wi-Fi. And yet you want tenner, and you can give me 12 hours. It's crazy.
I mean, we did a report recently. We partnered up with BTIQ, and it was into marginal gains and whatnot.
Right.
And one of the things that they actually spoke to people about was when they were staying in a hotel, more people valued leisure facilities over Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And maybe that's in a case now that when you get your phone contract, you can get 20 gig of data, 50 gig of data even in some instances, whereas I suppose back then it wasn't the case. This
is where I suppose a lot of this changed quite rapidly because you're nearly 10 years ago from when I started, and you couldn't just turn your phone over to a Wi-Fi hotspot and use it. You genuinely needed the actual Wi-Fi to make anything work. And would leisure facilities be more important now? As time went on, perhaps a bit more.
I suppose it depends on the person as well, isn't it? If it's someone that, like you were saying, you just want to get in, maybe watch a bit of Netflix, chill, take that time to yourself. Yeah, you would value that more.
And I think also it depends, how often you're away. By the time I left, by the time I changed roles and moved to CBRE, I think the last year there I spent 100 nights away from home in various locations, be it that's UK and abroad all in, and I probably did that the last 3 years I was there. I bet I averaged between 100 and 110 nights away, and so I think that changes your view on it. If I was away now, maybe if I was away once a month, and the occasional time I am away in London with my current job, it's a bit more of a treat, and you're a bit more, I want this, I want that. But then when you're doing it all the time, you begin to think, actually, I'm not. You can have all the gyms you want. I probably won't bother using it. I've been on site all day, running, walking around, and by the time I get in, I just want to get changed, have some food, and crash. So,
and you've got a young daughter as well, so you've got all the gym that you need at home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, now I'd just be pleased with the sleep.
How did it move then from you? Obviously, you're doing a lot of your kind of domestic travel. How did it then turn into international?
So the company always did international the whole time I was there, and it's just sort of seniority and experience. So to begin with, you were useful to them, running around and doing all these relatively sort of more low value, low profile work, which tend to be domestic. And then, as I progressed in my career, you started to get onto the, put your hand up and get a few of the foreign jobs. So, look, don't get me wrong, I'll tell you a few stories in a minute that where I'm moaning about it, but ultimately it's fantastic, see a bit of the world, and I was the right age, right point in life, didn't have a child. It was great, absolutely great. When you look back at the places I've been and what you've done, it was fantastic. But
and now you're going to complain about them.
Now I'm going to tell you how terrible it was. Yeah. Well, it wasn't it wasn't the places, it was the getting there half the time. But.
So what was your first trip abroad then? Obviously work-wise, what was your...
Yeah, so first trip abroad work-wise, the more senior members of staff were pretty confident that it absolutely ruined me for future travel, because from the point of view of the location, so it was pretty incredible. It was a mine in South Africa on the edge of the Kruger Park. So literally, middle of nowhere, this huge copper mine. It was the biggest man-made hole in Africa. You've never seen anything like it. But literally, the safari came onto the mine, so they couldn't really keep the animals off. So they just basically made it part of the safari park. So when we were doing our health and safety to go on, it was all the we'll watch out for forklifts. There's obviously like heavy machinery, all the usual stuff. And you got so blasé to it in the UK, because I was doing it all the time, that you were like, yeah, I know. And then they get to the next page or the next bit of the thing we were doing, and they're like, right, now animals. If you see a lioness, you should just stand your ground and stay still. They will wander off unless they've got a cub with them, in which case you should back away, but don't turn your back on them. And you're reading all this and going, nah, you read health and safety, and normally they're like, be careful of this, be careful of that, and you never see it. You never see any problems, and you very rarely see any of the stuff that they're worried about. And I'm thinking, and they're like, be careful driving. There's elephants around. There's this, there's that, the other, and you're like, yeah, well, okay, maybe, but you think, I won't see anything. Literally pulled out of the compound to go onto the mine proper, and had to stop while a herd of elephant crossed the road, and it was just, wow. You never see anything like it. But yeah, it was a bit of a. So
similar
as you can imagine, like Scotland, yeah. Like Scotland. And as you can imagine, all my colleagues were like, it's not always like this. This is an unusual...
Yeah. Because it's your first time.
Yeah.
So were the elephants the only animals that you got to experience on that first trip?
No. So there were... What was on the mine? So we saw elephants, baboons, giraffes. And that was a really good trip as well, because we managed to sort ourselves out and have a break in the middle. We were away for 3 weeks, and we had it in the middle where we had 2 days of safari. So one of the weekends, the mine was open on the weekend, but the people we needed to deal with weren't really there. So we 2 weeks in, we took 2 days off, and because when you're away, you tend to work 7 days a week, because what else are you going to do? Yeah. So yeah, we took 2 days off, went on safari, and that we saw everything except for the big cats, which was disappointing, but yeah, absolutely incredible.
Should have got your money back.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You said in this form I was going to see some cats. In terms of the planning of that, was that done through a travel management company? Was that done with somebody that was just in house with the company? How did that?
Life varied a bit in the time I was at Rushton's. So when I was first there. It was a mix of booking it yourself, and there was a chap who would book trips like that for us, but he was primarily he was sort of one-man band travel agent. So he would, he'd book your 2 week package trip to Benidorm, and he'd do this for us as well. So he was a travel agent, but not a commercial travel person. And then by the time I left, I think the last 18 months or so, we had a sort of proper travel management firm. So we experienced the gamut of it that went through. That particular trip, like I say, was booked by this guy. I shan't name names, but honestly, so as you can imagine, first trip, I was pretty green. As I got more experienced and we got to know this guy a bit more, we realised that there's certain bits which were a bit, should we say, slightly sketchy. So things were getting booked that helped him rather than us. The airlines he was using.
Miles and
Yeah, all those kind of things that, we weren't getting the points, but he was, and then if he wasn't available when you had a problem, it was a nightmare. But so we, very first trip, and as much as, like I say, the destination was incredible, what we got to do when we got there was incredible, the flight. So we flew out there, absolutely fine. Most flights to Southern Africa, a lot of it goes through Johannesburg. Got to Johannesburg, and we knew we were on a little flight in the morning. Little internal flight up to the mine, a little propeller plane type thing. So we get off, we land I think we landed about 10 o'clock at night, and he'd booked us some accommodation. Fine. It said airport hotel, perfect. Now, obviously you got to get there an hour before the next day. I think our flight in the morning was like 6-7 o'clock, so you've not got a big window. Wander out. Where's this hotel? The guy sort of says, it's here. Well, I must be just off site. Someone told us we had to get a taxi. Went out, got a taxi, jumped in. This guy sets off, and we're like, been in this taxi a while. Where's he going? And we've literally, you walk out the airport in Johannesburg, there's sort of 3 hotels there. We're like, why aren't we in one of them? I just want to go to bed. And then drive out, looking out the window. It's looking increasingly rough. The further away from the airport you get. Now, having spent more time in Johannesburg, I realised that actually a lot of it's compounds and it looks worse than it is from the outside. But, here's me, this green Englishman landing there for the first time. And then we get to the hotel, say a hotel in inverted commas. They've not finished building it. It's more of a motel, so you've got your own you can get straight to the car park. You don't need to go through reception, but go through reception, log in. Realised by now we're in Soweto. We're not really in Johannesburg anymore. And you're like, all I've heard is negative things about Soweto. Like, maybe the place isn't as bad as it seems, but you don't see a lot of good news stories coming out of Soweto. So we're already a bit nervous. You get in, and then we're placed in rooms that are nowhere, different floors, like nowhere near these other 2 chaps I'm travelling with who are a bit more experienced. Get in, I'm like, where am I? I ended up, it was almost like a little apartment, locked the external door, went into the bedroom, brought everything, like quickly cleaned my teeth. Everything that I'd brought with me went into the bedroom with me because I was like, what's going on here? I had this equipment and whatever. Lock then the internal door into the bedroom, and then I probably stupidly like barricade the door, put a bit of furniture behind it. Worse, I don't know if I even slept, but it's just, it was just like, this is.
We're just listening to every bang outside.
Yeah, we heard gunshots. We heard gunshots that night.
That was just your work colleagues.
That was just my work colleagues. Yeah, they were. Yeah, I mean, I say I heard gunshots. They probably just were outside the door with their phones, like setting off gunshot noises. But yeah, it was pretty ropey. Yeah. And then you're getting a taxi in the morning back to the airport. It's just a lot of stress when like I say, we walked past 2 hotels before we even got in the taxi. So yeah, that was. And then, then you got an early flight, and then you're getting straight on the mine, and then people are expecting you to do work, and it was just, look, the first thing I saw was an elephant, so it soon pepped me up, but it was a pretty scary introduction.
And from a culture side of things, I mean, what was the difference in obviously going over there, working over there? What was the culture shock like?
So not too bad. South Africa is pretty similar, but ex-empire and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
But... yeah, I mean, it's an odd mix when you get on the mines. It's you've got, because we were sort of north of Joburg, so it's the proper veldt. It's all sort of the Boers and all that kind of thing. You've got these guys. I mean, it's no wonder they've got a good rugby team, because guys who in this country would be like getting tapped up for international rugby players, built like big American fridges. You've never seen anything like huge guys, and they're just like normal guys walking around the mine. So you've got these huge big white guys who are proper your Boers and all this kind of thing, and then you've got and then it's just a complete mix. And you could see the change coming through because there was more and more black people getting into more senior positions, and that varied. Different places in Africa would be different, and you could see the racism in it. It was interesting. Yeah.
It was eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so obviously you come back from there. That was your first kind of experience. Were you still kind of G'd up to keep going on these trips, or? Oh yeah, I mean, look, I just come back from 3 weeks on safari. I mean, someone had paid me to have 3 weeks on safari, more or less. And every night we were staying in this really nice hotel. So every night you were going off site and finishing and having a beer before you went and got a shower, and you were looking out over this golf course that had
zebra and giraffe walking across a golf course while you're sat there having a cold beer, yeah, sign me up for the next job. But yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag from there, really.
So go on, what we'll do, because I know people love misery. What was your worst experience then if you're travelling?
Yeah, okay. Well, worst is there's a few. But so in terms of travel, one of the most difficult journeys. So there's kind of two that stick out. There was the time I went to Kazakhstan. So we were going to Kazakhstan to look at a oil refinery. Now there's 3 oil refineries on this site. 2 that were nice and shiny and new and built by the British and Americans post USSR, and then 1 built by the Russians. Kazakhstan was just terrible. We had to fly and land in Russia for starters because the local airport had been condemned and the runway was not in a fit state to land on.
Good start to the journey.
The nearest airport in Russia was a 5-hour journey to where we needed to the Kazakhstan border, and then a further 2 hours drive from there. So we landed, and we were going. I think we went in early winter. It was really cold. So we landed in Russia, got bundled into a minivan that had some other people because there's a lot of Westerners worked on this place. So this minivan was going back and forth all the time. Get on this minivan. Okay, Russia, not too bad sort of journey to the border, although shattered. In the dead of night, we arrive at the Russian border. Guys with machine guns come on, start poking around. What's going on here? You all have to get off. Some guy we hadn't seen before comes on, passports, takes all our passports, disappears. We were hanging around for 2 hours at the border while they were fussing about what we would do. Wow. And then you got over the border, and I've never been over a border before where the change was so remarkable, because it's just a big flat country, Kazakhstan, but the road was just pothole after pothole, and we had another 2 hours, and you felt ill, but you're tired, and it's just a horrendous journey, absolutely horrendous. And I think the flight to Russia itself was bad because it was some airline you've never heard of, because that's who flew there. And yeah, these guys, I didn't envy these guys most of the Westerners there were doing a month on, a month off. When we got there, it was, the hotel was terrible. The food was terrible. I mean, the only good bit of food they had was they had a pizza oven. But we were there for 2 weeks, so 2 weeks of pizza is pretty... You
never wanted to see Domino's ever again. As soon as you got back, it was...
And you couldn't do anything. You couldn't leave the hotel at night because there was issues around the way the police behaved, and it's just, terrible. And then another one in terms, there was, again, this one not so much difficult as in it was bad. It was just a slog. Was I flew to the far end of Russia, right out to Vladivostok, and then worked our way back, hopped back through Russia, which again was incredible. And don't get me wrong, it was a great experience, but that was some bad travel.
So how did you work your way back then? Was it flights? Was it trains? What was the... So
that was one where we'd had certain stuff booked for us before we went, but it just shows... It's interesting when it shows doing a little bit of research beforehand or speaking to someone who knows what they're doing makes a big difference, because there was a lot of hopping back and forth, and because you wanted decent airlines, you were having to loop back through big cities. You couldn't just take little internal flights, and Russia's obviously huge. So flew to St. Petersburg, spent some time in St. Petersburg, flew to Vladivostok, worked our way back via flights. We had one flight, and we realised once we were there, again, you're like, oh God, well, how has this not been thought through by somebody? But it hadn't been. And we realised we were flying, we were spending 2 days essentially flying from where we were back to Moscow and then to where we wanted to be next, which was, and we're talking like the length of Russia. This was one stop after Vladivostok, so, it was a long way. And then we sort of, chatting to some people there and one thing and another, realised that actually if we just never got on that flight, we could get the overnight train, and then we've saved ourselves 2 days, because the way it was all going to work out, we were supposed to, like I say, spend 2 days travelling, and so we just caught this sleeper train, which, that was an experience. Just little things you don't know, which, you would hope your travel provider would tell you, but hadn't told us. So,
is this still this single guy in a...
yes, this was just
a travel agent.
Yeah, exactly. With a bit of us chipping in. Russian trains all run on Moscow time. So I didn't know that. So you try and get on a train in Russia, it will say this train leaves at 8 p.m. Okay, but that's not 8 p.m. local time. That's 8 p.m. Moscow time. So we're like 3 or 4 time zones over, and you'll get to the train station and you're going, oh, I want to book 8 o'clock train. Oh, that's gone. What? It's only 6. Yeah, Moscow time. And you're like, what? And the trains just all run to Moscow time because it's easier than trying to, work it out. And trains will go through time zones because you're on it for that long. So yeah.
And obviously this person that's booking the travel didn't look into that, didn't figure that out and have to tell you about it beforehand.
But then it was probably the first time he'd ever dealt with Russia, where, because we were a small firm, he was working for us, and then, I think he worked for a couple of other companies. And then, but what we were doing was quite unusual, going to lots of different countries. And we were going to more obscure locations because, in America, you've got someone, the kind of work we're doing, in America, Australia, there's someone who can do it already there, who the people employing you will trust. Whereas, Russia, Africa's got its own issues in terms of, legal issues or compliance issues that they want a Westerner to have gone and seen it. Largely because if you get it wrong and you're sat in England, it's much easier for them to sue you or have some repercussions. Whereas if they're trying to sue a Russian, I'm sure there are Russian surveyors who could do the work, but the legal thing is much more complicated. Cheaper to fly me out. So it's probably the first time he's dealt with Russia. Whereas if we did later on when we were dealing with a big travel provider, they'd sent other people to Russia, so they'd learnt those lessons before we had to. Whereas he would learn that lesson from us and then probably never send anyone to Russia again. So it's a wasted bit of knowledge, I suppose. And
just thinking about some of these places that you've been to, was there kind of a duty of care aspect with that? You're sending you to these places that are potentially dangerous. You're there. Yeah. How did they work? Was there kind of tracking? How would they have known if you would have been?
Well, there was there was the whole sort of, you'd be in contact with the office with emails and stuff. They would have your travel details and your next of kin and all that kind of thing. And the office would check on you. But, some of these guys I've been working with were, they were 55, 60. They'd been doing it since they were 20. So to them, they were really relaxed about it because they were like, well, this is incredible. Now I've got a mobile phone that works when I'm in a foreign country. Whereas, I used to do this when if someone had to get hold of me, they were having to ring the head office and then go through various calls and whatever. So, to them, it felt fine. But if it was a dangerous place, they tend to send 2 of us. So there's that bit.
And was it one person had more experience in that area or that location, for instance, and then someone that's a bit?
There was a bit of that, but it was more just that so you weren't dealing with it by yourself. Where did I have it? Example of something. Not that a travel agent particularly have helped you with this, but So this was one where we were traveling with the travel company, but I went to Mozambique, and I don't even know much about this trip to Mozambique, but they had post-colonial big civil war and
history lesson there for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Don't worry about looking that up. That's just exactly how it happened.
Yeah, it's simple as that. Yeah, just big civil war. Yeah. But we went out to value a hydro dam that had been built for apartheid South Africa, so to provide power in South Africa, and it was because it was the main thing that generated money for Mozambique at the time. During the war, it was fought over quite a lot. Now, we were there I think I was there for about 2 weeks, and again, one of these countries, a bit more relaxed, should we say. Yeah. So we got there, they just threw us a set of keys, there's a car out there, truck thing, help yourselves, do what you want to do, travel around, blah, blah, blah. Because, we were valuing the village that was associated with this place. It was huge. And so about 5 days in, someone comes along and says, should we go for dinner? All right, yeah. First time we've had much contact with anyone who worked there. And we were chatting away, and I'd seen these signs everywhere. Now, there were people living what was essentially looked like a fairly subsistence lifestyle in and around, but on the land, but not to do with the land, as it were, not to do with the mine, the dam. And there were all these signs saying, don't dig. Now, I thought this was about, we don't want you trying to cultivate this bit of land or whatever you're doing, just warning people off. Anyway, so I said to the guy, what are these signs about? Just trying to make conversation. He said, oh, yeah. Has no one told you? No one told me what? Oh, yeah, don't step off tarmac. Stay on tarmac at all times. Okay, why is that? I've been driving, thinking it's fun to drive like off-road because we can. I've been running around buildings. I've been, I'll climb up this bank because I'll get a better photo, all this kind of stuff. And it turns out the place was littered with landmines. He was like, we've no idea where all the landmines are. He said, that sign is because if you're digging and you hit a landmine, you are going up. And he said, that's so stay on the tarmac, there's no landmines. I was like, Jesus.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that now.
Yeah, so, I mean...
That's the sign in the reception when you get the keys.
Yeah. But I mean, that was one whereby we finished early. We got all the work done, we got finished early, and it was brilliant because we were able to just speak to someone and they got us out on an earlier flight. And we were back. So, and previous to that, where I'd had situations where I'd booked my own flights, and I had no flexibility. I was stuck. I'd finish early, and I was stuck somewhere. Or the worst case, you're overrunning. I've had a situation where I had to pay for a second flight because we'd overrun, and you're having to carry that cost on your credit card because there wasn't much we could do about it.
Wasn't there a situation where you needed to get back from a place to get a midwife appointment?
Yeah. So. And we were travelling around. So this one, I was. So we'd done a couple of days. It was Eastern Europe, done a few bits, and the last site we had to visit was Yerevan, which is, I think, from memory, is Moldova, but I can't quite remember. Anyway, so I was in Yerevan, and I was with a colleague, and we came back, and things had just got out of kilter with flights and everything else, and it was my it was actually the scan for my the 12-week scan for my daughter. So obviously wanted to be back for it, and sort of made the call, and they got me sorted, got me on a flight. It's a bit of a what's the word? Bit of an odd flight round. I think I ended up having to sort of hop somewhere and then through to Amsterdam or whatever, but not something I wouldn't have managed to queue those flights up. That was like a travel management company. That was they were able to sort that out for me. Quick phone call. They had like an emergency number, I think it was, and they just got in touch with them and said, "Look, you booked this for me. I need to get back earlier." Rather, I wasn't going to make the flight that I wanted to make, and blah blah blah. And they sorted it out for me, and it was good. Yeah. Made a big difference.
And I imagine that's one of the negatives of using a one-man band as opposed to like a TMC. They're not going to be available 24/7 to you.
You'd have to get hold of them in the first place. But
the guy's out drinking with his friends, and then you ring up, I've got to get back, and he's thinking, you're going nowhere, pal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll draw you a picture of the scan, and you can have it.
Yeah. Well, we had other situations where we did get stuck places because either we'd booked ourselves or we couldn't get back, and it's up to each individual how you want to handle it. But I had a colleague, and he used to get he was tight. There's no two ways about it. He was tight, and he used to it's amazing what worked for him. But he'd book his own hotels. I want my own hotel. I want certain things. Quite fussy. Fine. But he'd book a hotel. He'd find it on late rooms, or something like that, on the internet, and we got some good deals at times, especially when you were in the UK doing that kind of thing. And he'd find like in the rate it'd be whatever it was, and then he'd ring the hotel and be like, "Can you beat that rate?" and blah blah blah. And eventually, we had to say to him, like, you're penny pinching, you're saving yourself £5 here, £5 there. It's not even your money. It's not even our money. It's the client's money, which I appreciate. Look after your client, but do you think the client would rather you spend 2 hours researching what you're doing for him before you arrive, or 2 hours making sure you've saved him a tenner on a hotel? I mean, it's just crazy, but that's, each person does something different, I suppose.
You've got to have some good experiences. You've got to have some... What's been your best? What's been your best travel experience? That first trip to Africa was pretty special. Yeah. We can't use that. We've already talked about that.
Already talked about that one.
This is a polished podcast, James. We should have.
Yeah. What were some of the highlights? So I once flew into Copenhagen, did a job, and then drove all the way up to the north of Sweden. In a fairly snowy time of year, and that was just incredible. It took me about a day, but it was just, that was just an incredible sort of journey. Really, really enjoyed that. Some of the people you meet who look after you, and I went to Botswana. We were really looked after there. That was great, and we saw some really nice sort of really really good countryside, things like that. For the weather, the time I went to Trinidad, that was pretty good. That was some good sunshine. So look, there's been some great ones, but there's.
As your family gets older, do you think that you would ever go back more to do you think that would ever come up that you'd like to do some more international travel? Look, you looked at it from the guys who
their kids had grown up and weren't about anymore. And it's not a bad lifestyle. And it was fairly, but with seniority, you get some perks, don't you? So whereas I would be,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know, James.
yeah. Look.
This isn't.
Well, maybe this is to come, but yeah, no. So I had a guy he worked with me, and the jobs would go through him. So he would cherry pick the good ones. So whereas I would be scrabbling around in the back of a van on my way to Kazakhstan, or the time I got onto a flight, and I say a flight, this was like a little internal flight, and literally as you got to the aeroplane, the guy looked at you and said, "How much do you weigh? How much does your bag weigh?" And you'd look at him and go, "Oh, I'm 10 stone." And he'd look at you and go, "Nah, you're nearer to 11. You're sitting back right." And then the next guy on, "You're right, you're back left." And he was literally balancing out the plane, because there was 8 of us, and it was that kind of, you're just like, okay, this doesn't feel very professional.
That's pressure at your job.
So while I was doing those kind of things, this guy would cherry pick the job, which involved flying into the boot of Italy, working his way up to the north of Italy across a week, with about 3 stops along the way, like, Rome, Naples, and he'd like have got it set up so that he had, a day in each, probably about half a day's work. The rest of the time he'd be eating ice cream and pizza, and so when you can cherry pick the good ones, it works well.
He's listening to this now going, "It wasn't all great."
Yeah. Well, he did.
I've had some bad experiences as well.
Oh, he did, yeah. So when you say about driving, he was going away with a colleague of mine to Cardiff for 2 nights, and
could have just left it there. That could have been.
Well, yeah, I know, yeah. And
We love cars.
so my colleague at the time had an MR2. So he said to this guy who was our boss, he said, "Look," he said, "I'll drive." And he's like, "Yeah, fine." He said, "Got to travel light though. There's not a lot of room in the boot, obviously, and I've got no back." "Oh yeah, fine." So he gets there first thing in the morning. He said, he's literally got a toothbrush and a plastic bag with presumably a shirt and a pair of pants in it, and that was him. That was all he's got. And then get to the other end, and my mate pulls out a duffel bag with his kit, and he's like, "You said travel light?" I said, "Yeah, light. I mean, I meant like a small bag, not just your toothbrush."
Not
and
a Sainsbury's carry bag.
Not a Sainsbury's carry bag and your toothbrush.
There are other supermarkets available. We just have to throw that in there. James, it's been great having you on the show. Thanks for coming and seeing us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
And don't forget, you can get involved in Absolute Clarity either as a guest or through sponsorship by emailing podcast@claritytm.co.uk. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.